Hello, Mark.
Hello.
I'm just waiting to see if anybody else is going to come. We don't even have our guest speaker yet. Oops, somebody else is on there. Somebody's waiting. Oh, Nina's on here. Okay. We'll just wait and see. I will also email Matt and remind him of the time.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks
Hi,
for
Nina.
hosting this. Yep.
Well, I don't know how good it's going to be. We don't have a lot of people online right now, so it'll
Well,
be
yeah.
interesting.
Give him a few more minutes.
Yep. Yeah, I guess we still have one whole minute. Um, and I don't seem to have to. How It must be because how long ago I set up these meetings. I don't have to admit people on these meetings, and I don't know why. Normally I have to.
I don't know.
I don't understand computers. I just deal with them too much. Way too much. All right, we'll get everybody. Oh, we're getting more people on board. Cool. Now we're up to six. Oh, plus meeting notes. Five plus meeting notes. Um, I know that Natasha is unlikely to make it. I know that Jay Mager is unlikely to make it. I think perhaps Mark may not, but I'm never sure with Mark. Mark Pokras, he seems to be. All depends on the meeting whether he's able to beat it or not. So we'll give everything a little couple more minutes, and then we'll get started. Welcome everyone. Oh, Matt's here, which is good. Which, Matt, if you need anything to present later, just send me a message or turn on your mic and let me know because we're really informal around here. Um, and I
Yeah, no
guess we
problem.
might have
I was just gonna screen share. Is that okay?
a screen. Sure, we can do that. No
Okay.
problem when the time comes. You're
Cool.
okay with being recorded? We normally record these.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Nothing that we can't share. All right. I'll actually allow for. Oh, you don't need to see my notes. Stop share. I will allow for multiple hosts, and that will start us off, so you can do that. Um, and I
Where
guess
does
we
it
have.
get shared?
Mhm. When I get around to posting it, it can be
Okay.
delayed if you need me to for some reason.
Okay. Sounds good.
Typically, it's the last 2 weeks of the month, the following month. So it's like this one will be put up in late September. People in the know could probably grab it a little earlier, but most people don't. All right. Well, welcome, folks. We'll get started. Let me just grab my notes here so I know what I'm talking about. We are going to have a small group today, but we'll record this for those who cannot make it. I think a lot of people are either in the field or taking time off after being in the field. Um, so we'll get going. As many of you know, I'm Kathy Jones. I'm from the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, and I am just taking the lead on this meeting. And we're going to have Matt Fuirst is going to give us a great talk on what he's been working on, loon population research. But before that, I was going to open the mic and see if anybody wants to give updates. If we can keep it for like 20 minutes worth of updates, if anybody wants to share, especially if you haven't shared recently, that'd be great. I don't have a lot to share, just seasons progressing for the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, and I'm waiting to see what kind of data comes in. Um, but I'd love to hear from other folks if you have anything to share.
Hi, Kathy. I don't have anything to share, but this is Sheila from Minnesota, and I see we have some new friends from Minnesota that have joined this meeting that are from, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but a new group that's forming on the Gunflint Trail for Loon Conservancy and Loon Rescue. And Mark Ellis, I see, is here. And I'm not sure if any other people, Mark, from your area are here, but maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and your group.
Sure. So I learned about this group from Mona Hansen that's co-chairing a loon monitoring program on the Gunflint. I know Sheila from online. We've never met, and now I'm seeing you move in real time through the computer. Nice to meet you this way. I've been closer to we have a small family cabin also near Emily, Minnesota. And so that's where I've done most of my loon photography. That's my main background with loons. But with this monitoring program on the Gunflint Trail, which is a bigger set of more wilderness-like lakes, we do have problems with lure and entanglement and fishing line entanglement. Mona has been in touch with you a lot, I think, Sheila, this
Right.
year. And so we're hoping to get some training. Probably, I don't know the timing, probably early next year. I don't know
Yeah.
when that's going to be.
Yeah, so I don't know if the other people in the group know, but I coordinate Minnesota Loon Rescue, which we just started formally this year. And Gail Buell from Wildlife Rehabilitation and Release was our trainer, and along with some support from other staff at Wildlife Rehabilitation and Release. And I did talk to Gail and Gretchen, and they're planning on doing the training on the Gunflint, I think, early next summer.
Okay, that's what I remember. There's been a lot of emails that have gone by, so yeah, I'm anxious to get it because if I saw loon in trouble, I'd want to help, but I don't know what to do yet. So
Yeah, well, I won't talk too much longer, but it's really fabulous that you guys are going to get trained because we have a big gap in coverage for volunteers in your area. So
okay,
thanks for stepping up.
yeah, glad to do it.
Is
Well,
anybody,
thank you.
and Mark, are you the only person here from your group?
I haven't seen anybody else join, so I might be today.
Okay,
I thought others were joining, but we'll find out.
thank you.
Well, just to catch everybody up, there are two different working groups that meet today. There's this one, which is the stewardship group, and Sheila is also part of the rescue and rehabilitation group that meets in what, about an hour and a half, Sheila? And now I have put a link online if you want to be added to the list to be emailed these meetings every month. But that's different as well from the Sheila's the group that's on about loon rescue and rehab. So there's two options there to consider. I'm glad you're here. I think this is a great meeting to start with, and I'm hopefully you will find it interesting. Yeah. Um, anyone else have anything to share update wise? Well, it's going to be a quick meeting. We'll have lots of time to ask Matt questions. Any recent events or interesting things that you wanted to share about? We have sometime in the next couple of weeks in Canada, we'll have a CBC radio interview coming out, but I don't have the date on that. They've been slow in getting it up. It's quite complex interview, so I'm looking forward to that. They emailed us again today about it. So, but other than that, we do not have a lot of activities on the ground now, other than what Matt's involved with, which involves all the programs. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I just wanted to mention I'm going to go on a form, and then I'm just going to let Matt take over. And I just want to mention that anybody who has ideas about what to do for upcoming meetings, let us know. It has been suggested to me by our Nature Counts team, and Nature Counts is part of the Avian Knowledge Network, and it's a large-scale system that leverages everybody's data into one open data platform. And it's been suggested to me that if people are interested in learning about open data platforms like that, I should have Kyle Horner, who's the engagement coordinator for that program, to come on board. So that's just something to mull over. And if we have a quiet time sometime, I'll see if Kyle can come in if people are interested. But other than that, and some neat work that we saw at the last Loon monitoring subcommittee meeting by Mary Ren Zhang about her data logger work, where she's looked at temperatures and the nest site where she is, and she put some against time-lapse cameras. That was quite fun and interesting, and she'll come in and share that with us on our next meeting as one of the monitoring update for the Loon monitoring subcommittee update. That's all I have. It looks like Sheila may be. Oh, she's still there. I thought for a minute, Sheila, you were locked there. So without further ado, if no one has questions or updates, I can turn it over to you, Matt, if you're ready. You should be able to share.
Yeah, ready whenever.
All right.
Okay. Give me one moment.
Maybe I should introduce you a bit. Maybe we should start with that. Matt Fuirst is Dr. Matt Fuirst is presently working for Birds Canada, and he's been involved with this work on trying to. He understands it far better than me, so forgive me if I say this wrong, Matt. He's trying to
Fine.
wrestle together all the many areas of Loon monitoring data into a single analysis. At the same time, he's also, and I'm going to let him give you this position, involved with the Canadian Migration Monitoring Network as one of the leads on Long Point Bird Observatory, if not the lead on Long Point Bird Observatory. Are you at that position now, Matt? The lead on Long Point Bird Observatory?
Yeah, you could say so. I'm happy. Yeah, I'm a research ecologist at Birds Canada. I kind of oversee numerous pillars of work, one of which is working closely with Doug Tozer on the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey data, and another large pillar of my position is Long Point Bird Observatory, amongst many other research collaborations and networks.
Well, then I'll turn it over to you, and I hope everybody enjoys the talk.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy, and thanks for having me. Nice to meet you all. I see that John and Nina are on the call. John and Nina, good to see you. Forgive me, some of this will be a little bit repetitive to what was presented at the NELSWIG meeting, but I'll at least have some updated figures that you might not have seen yet. For those of you who haven't been kind of briefed on what I've been working on, I'll backtrack a little bit. I worked as a postdoc with Doug Tozer, Mark Mallory, and Walter Piper in collaboration with Birds Canada. And essentially, what we were kind of interested in tackling was using all of the data from the different loon monitoring groups that are available, the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey for one, and then many from the US as well, to basically get a better understanding for how loons are doing across their range, and how their trends can be better understood, and what potential mechanisms might be leading to patterns that we see in their productivity. And so, as you all know, the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey encompasses thousands and thousands of monitored lakes across Canada, and in conjunction with various research groups across the US, such as the Loon Preservation Committee in New Hampshire, Walter Piper's work in Wisconsin, working with NITA and those of the folks at the Adirondacks, just to name a few. We were able to kind of combine all of the productivity data on territorial loon pairs that we could find in order to kind of get a better understanding for how loons are doing. And so this kind of led us to kind of tackle three main project objectives that we've been working on. One, to compare loon productivity from these various study regions across North America So when I say study regions, I'm kind of using the metric of different populations that are monitored throughout all these working groups. So the Adirondacks would be one, New Hampshire would be another, Ontario would be another, Wisconsin would be another, and so forth. And being able to better understand what those mean rates of productivity are across their breeding range, essentially. Now, it's worth at least qualifying that when we're talking about the breeding range in this study, it is more of that southern extent of their breeding range, northern U.S. and southern Canada predominantly. Obviously, we have many lakes that are monitored through the CLLS that go into northern regions of Canada, but it is predominantly more of that southern edge of the loon's range. And using all of that productivity data, we wanted to investigate what the long-term trends are. One huge value to doing this project is we're able to tap into resources that span decades, if not more, multiple decades worth of productivity data from across a wide geographic extent. And that's a really unique thing to be able to have so many different working groups that are monitoring loons over time and being able to tell a compelling story from a large time frame in which loons have been monitored. And looking at that data and being able to kind of see what are the trends of these loons related to their productivity. And when I say productivity, I'm talking about fledgling success. So those 6-week-old chicks are what I'm talking about. I'll hint at it and we can kind of discuss a few other things related to adult survival and other measures of loon success and the factors that might influence population growth rates. But it's worth clarifying that the metric that we used for this study was essentially chick success, so fledgling success. We figured that was the best metric to be able to identify loon reproductive success and what is, the most representative metric of productivity and potential recruitment into loon populations. So being able to look at all of that data, we also tackled that third objective, which is essentially to propose different hypotheses that might be occurring at large scales. And what I'll kind of get to in a bit when I discuss the implications of the work is that there really isn't one short answer. We're not looking for you guys to take away anything from this as like, this is the one factor. It's sort of a death by 1,000 cuts situation. Loons have a variety of different threats, as you know. And so we're kind of trying to just tease apart what those threats might be and what are the larger factors. I'm assuming you guys can see the slides as I go through, correct? Cool. So a paper published in 2021 by Larison et al. Described several different what are called conservation units of loons from across North America, primarily using genetic analyses to tease apart different regions of loons that would be genetically distinct and linking those trends with different rates of decline based off of those different conservation units. Now, this was one of the first publications in, say, the last decade that really highlighted that loons may not be doing as well across the board in like a uniform way. We commonly think of loons as common loons. They're ubiquitous. They occur across a wide geographic extent. And what you can see here in this figure from this paper is that there's these different color-coded conservation units of loons. And what this paper showed was that certain conservation units or regions of where loons breed are doing more successfully than others in regards to their population growth rate. So they found that areas in New England are doing sort of like moderately stable or declining. The Great Lakes region is experiencing a decline. The prairies of Canada have showed a decline, and then there's some other gaps in knowledge across other portions of the range. And so this led the Northeastern Loon working group, NELSWIG, to essentially, oh, weird. There we go. To essentially join forces and better understand, what the factors are that might be influencing these variations in loon decline or success across their range. And so here's a map of some, not all, of the partners in which we were outsourcing data on loon productivity, ranging from the West Coast, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, as well as BRI and Lucas Savoy's work that also occurs in parts of Washington State, all the way to the East Coast of the US and Canada, and of course, a large portion of this data set, including the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey. Now, it's important to mention that some of these programs that we acquired loon productivity data for operate at very coarse spatial scales as well as different temporal resolutions, while others occur at very fine scale data on loon reproduction and survival. So a good example of that would be the Biodiversity Research Institute, BRI. The work that they do in Maine is monitoring really a small proportion of occupied loon lakes within the state. So their long-term data is more of a snapshot of a small proportion of loons that are monitored in Maine. To contrast that, long-term studies by Walter Piper in Wisconsin have very individual level loon lake data on not only the lakes, but also the success of individually banded pairs. And so it's just important to highlight that while most of these organizations have data that covers fledgling success, those 6-week-old chicks, or at least an approximate measure of 6-week-old chicks, the resolution of the data they collect, how frequently they check the loon-occupied lakes, how often territories are monitored across years, and the extent, how long the population's been studied and how many lakes, all those things varied significantly. But it's still really impressive. Nonetheless, here's a map of all of the lakes that we included in our paper. We got data from 5 different Canadian provinces and 7 US states, compiling a total of about 48 years of loon productivity data. The oldest loon productivity data that we used was from New Hampshire, and it went as recent as 2023 data for various different working groups. So it's really incredible. We were able to incorporate data from over 3,000 lakes across the US and Canada, allowing us to address productivity and patterns in productivity from a very large geographic extent. And so the first thing we wanted to kind of tease apart was, how does that mean productivity differ across the regions? Now, to clarify, this figure here needs to be updated. John and Nina, for those of you listening who have seen the paper and our collaborators, this is a figure that hasn't been revised with new mean productivity measures, but it still gives a kind of similar snapshot to those of you who are seeing this for the first time. And essentially what this figure highlights, you have mean productivity on the y-axis and then the loon regions on the x-axis, is it shows that the amount of offspring, that metric of fecundity that are being produced across these regions, is quite variable in itself. So forget the long-term trends, forget the temporal element of it. If you just kind of take the metric of mean productivity, and these are controlled for various other factors in our modeling, you can see that certain areas, such as the East Coast and New England, have lower mean productivity measures than areas out west, such as Washington and BC, or areas in the Great Lakes. There's sort of this geographic pattern where productivity seems to be higher west and lower towards the east. But this doesn't have any measure of temporal variability. And so looking at trends, it makes you wonder, how does productivity change over time? And so what we did was we used the productivity data and put it into a modeling framework that takes into account the fact that certain lakes are monitored multiple times throughout the study duration, as well as the fact that multiple individual territories are monitored throughout the study duration. And what that did was it gave us a trend percentage, essentially an estimate of how many loons each region is gaining or losing over the course of the study duration. And so what this gave us was a kind of general framework, or a general kind of picture of the extent to which loons are declining. And as you can see by the legend that's in the top right, we kind of have this gradient of really steep declines in purple, medium declines in red, weak declines in orange, almost barely any decline in yellow, and then a stable or increasing trend in blue. And what you can see kind of across the board here is that nowhere is really stable. They are all experiencing some level of decline related to their productivity, with exception of Maine, which showed that it was relatively stable with a measure of 0.17 loons gained or produced per year. Now, it's worth mentioning, as I mentioned earlier, Maine, various states use rafts, as we know, to help reinforce loon reproductive success. Maine is one of them. And it's possible that because the Maine data that we used was such a small proportion of the potential loons throughout the state, and of that fraction, those loons used rafts, we weren't able to tease that apart in the data set. That might be a potential confounding factor of why Maine is supposedly doing better. Or maybe they have some secret sauce that the rest of us need to learn. Other than that, you can see these broad patterns of decline. The Atlantic provinces of Canada and parts of New England in the US are experiencing steep or medium declines. Ontario appears to have a moderate decline. I'd say second to Maine, Quebec seems to be the most quote unquote stable, experiencing a very weak decline. But this pattern wasn't really significant in our analyses, so it's can't really concretely say that it is stable or not, because the pattern in itself wasn't very strong. But this really paints a picture that loons are not doing very well. And this is reinforced by these trends. Here we see general trends that show declines across most of the southern portion of the loon range. This measure of the number of 6-week-old chicks per pair per year. Again, just reminding that this is based off of territorial pairs, not nesting pairs. And you can sort of see that similar narrative that these birds, at least their productivity measures, are declining at a very large spatial extent. Here in each figure, you will see a single point for each year, which is on the x-axis, and a line of best fit that is drawn. So that line is generated from the model that we use. It's a line of best fit based off of the calculated trend. And so even if a certain pattern doesn't seem too clear, the line of best fit is going to show you the average trend over duration. So one example of that is you can see New York kind of in the middle in that light blue, has quite varying levels of productivity throughout from 2024 to 2023. See, it goes up and down and up and down. And with the bare eye, it might not necessarily look like there's a decline happening, because you just see that up and down variability. But when you draw a line of best fit using the model predicted values, it will show you that there is going to be sort of an average decline happening. And essentially what I want you to kind of take away from this is just unfortunate that what we see as a very cosmopolitan and ubiquitous bird to some extent is not doing well at some part of their natural history and their annual cycle. And this is sort of like something that I'm happy to discuss as a group, because one thing that we being the collaborators on the paper in which these results will be published in are discussing is that this is really one part of the story. Productivity in this study is defined by fledged chicks. So we did not examine metrics of whether or not a nest was simply successful or not, whether or not on a binary level, if it had better success. And importantly, for just the demographics of loon populations and estimating loon population growth, we didn't look at adult survival in any way. And so this is only kind of going to show you one part of the story, which is productivity. And so we can speculate on a variety of different reasons for why productivity might be declining across such a wide extent. And so going back to the Larison et al. Paper that sort of proposed that different patterns of population growth rate might be happening across different regions of the loon's breeding range. What we at Fuirst Canada and what Doug and I have discussed, along with, really productive conversations with other members of this paper and this research working group, are that there's various other hypotheses that might explain patterns of loon productivity and survival, and that these patterns and those hypotheses might be explained at very small scales, and they might also be explained at wide scales. And so we kind of, in the paper that we're planning to publish, we pose several mechanisms of decline. Three main pathways we suggest are influencing loons at the broad range. So when I highlight broad range, I emphasize that because there's inevitably a multitude of threats that harm loons, everything from disease to lead tackle, flooding of nests, all the different threats that we as a group can identify. What we pose in this paper is that only a subset of those threats are likely occurring across the entire range. And so there's obviously going to be threats that are harming loon productivity or adult survival, which in turn will influence all of these patterns that we're seeing. But some of those might be more focal and region-specific threats, as opposed to threats that maybe are related to climate change that might be occurring at a broad level. And so we know from a paper that Doug and Kristen Bianchini published several years ago that at least in Ontario, acid rain that leads to essentially a change in lake pH or acidity, and therefore contributes to fish mercury contamination, is connected to climate change in Ontario. And they were able to pretty much identify which factors in Ontario specifically are contributing to loon decline. And that was essentially this mercury pH combination that is contributing to the decline of loons in Ontario. So this is just, I use this as an example. I'm not going to tease apart mechanisms for every region. I'm just focusing on Ontario for this example, because it shows that when you hone in on a specific region, you can tease apart what those mechanisms are that might be driving loon declines. And so what are the factors that are influencing loons at a broad scale? They might be factors related to lake temperature and the acidification of lakes, therefore contributing to the resources that are prevalent in those lakes, and that then in turn influencing foraging success and the condition of these birds. Another widespread factor that might be influencing loons across their range is changes in the frequency and intensity of precipitation events. Walter Piper's work in Wisconsin has demonstrated that water clarity is an important predictor of loon survival. And that might be a process that's occurring not only in Wisconsin. We know that across the northeastern US and in Canada, there are these highly variable phases of precipitation and intermittently drought as well. And all of those can lead to various factors that might influence whether or not loons are successful or not. And another sort of more widespread and climate induced process that's honestly quite a black box and one I'm intrigued about, but don't really have the ability to test specifically at this moment, is how the resources that are available on the wintering grounds for these birds are potentially factors that carry over and influence their productivity in the breeding range. And so one thing that's just interesting for that is you have climate-induced warming of sea surface temperatures that might influence, or we know they're influencing, forage fish on the coast. And that might be a large contributor of the ability for loons to then produce young the next year, for those young to be above average condition and for them to succeed. And so what we propose in this paper that we're working on right now is just several hypotheses, including these mechanisms that I've listed, that might be explaining widespread loon declines, and also mentioning other factors such as shoreline development, lead, mercury, predation, competition amongst other loons, all those other environmental factors that are also contributing to loon declines at regional scales. And that's about it. That's all I got for you. But happy, I know it was relatively brief, so I'm happy to just chat about what I've been working on and kind of just break it down and inform those who are new to this project that we're working on anything that might be of interest.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody has questions, put them in the chat, put up your hand. Now you're in the process of getting this ready for publication. Do you have a timeline yet, or you're still just working through that processing right now?
It's a long timeline. It's been a long project in the works. You know, it's an uphill battle working with various different working groups and different timelines. I have a draft that I'm sending out to our co-authors in the next week or so, but it is not in review yet. So it's important to mention that all the results that I'm showing to you are not published yet, and should be, you know, that should be accounted for, as well as the distribution of the figures that I shared. And obviously, once this is all published, we'll share it along with you.
Okay. Any questions, anyone? Okay, Tamara and we'll start with Sheila. I think your hand went up first, and then Tamara.
Hi. So I live in Minnesota, and Mark, maybe you've read more about this than I have or know more about it than I do, but that there's quite a mercury problem in many of our Minnesota lakes. And so I live in Cass County, and we're part of Walter Piper's study. Our chain is part of his study lakes and Crow Wing in Cass County. And so I'm wondering, is that something that can be looked into, the mercury pH situation like you discovered in Ontario? That's something to be looking into in the Midwest in Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And it's one that we as loon researchers are often debating, is the extent to which mercury influences these loons. The way I see it, we need to essentially check off the box and eliminate or fail to support the hypothesis that is mercury at a large extent in order to identify whether or not it's region specific or widespread. The how we do that is tricky because it requires us to have lake specific mercury levels that are at the spatial scale that loons like exist on, right? Loons at the territorial level are going to be reproducing at some territories on the same lake. Some of them are going to be occupying different lakes. And so we need to have lake quality, water quality data essentially that varies at the lake level. That's the biggest barrier that we have. That when looking into projects like this, there are state or provincial organizations that collect water clarity data or other metrics of lake health, but they're not at the spatial scale that then we can compare with the loon reproductive success. That's the biggest challenge I've been having. But if that exists at a regional level, we could tease it apart more focally.
I guess one other observation I have, since I grew up on this lake, so I'm 70 years old, and I was here as a child in the 60s, and then we've been away for a while and returned. And I have friends who have lived on this whole lake their whole lives, this whole chain. And one thing that we're observing is there are hardly any minnows swimming around when we're, out on our docks or in the water swimming. And of course, when we were kids, we were always fishing off the dock. There were tons of sunnies and perch and bluegills. Never see those next to our docks anymore. And I'm just wondering how big of an impact that is and what the cause is. Is it overfishing? I don't know what it is, but I would think that that would have an impact. And I know Walter talks about the silver spoon effect and low chick weights. So any ideas about that?
It's multifaceted. There's no straight answer. One potential mechanism is simply that due to the acidification of lakes, resource availability is declining. So the abundance of those juvenile fish that loons would rely on are decreasing. I don't have measures of that in my data set of whether or not there are fewer fish, but that is a potential effect of lake acidification, is that, the aquatic organisms in the lake are impacted, and that's going to then carry over to influence the loons. And I don't know about angling. Published studies have actually shown that the number of anglers over the past 50 years has decreased. But whether there's overfishing on specific lakes is impossible for me to answer.
Yeah. And I don't think you could answer this either, but it's, the fish that are stocked and everything, like what's the effect of those fish, the walleyes, northerns, muskies on the population of smaller fish, that's it. But
yeah,
that's a question we have for our DNR.
Yeah, it's not within the scope of this project, but it would make for a really cool experimental test for loons. If you were able to compare, there's only so much you can control, but if you were to compare the reproductive success of loons on known stocked lakes versus ones that aren't, that could be an interesting sort of field experiment to look at. Simply, is resource availability a really strong factor for these loons? That isn't something I really did, but could be a fun spin-off.
Thank you.
Well, we should go to Tamara, but I should mention as well that I recall seeing some work done. I think it's in the Yellowstone area about actually stocking lakes. Maybe John remembers this, I don't know. Actually stocking lakes at the right size of fish for loons. So there's at least one related publication out there somewhere. I just don't remember it very well. Tamara? Or
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Hi, Matt. I'm Tamara Zeller. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska, and do various things, but one of them is loon work. And I know we're a big question mark on that map.
Yeah.
So I was just curious from a very high level, how we can have our story told. I mean, I've been working with various researchers at USGS here in Fish and Wildlife here in Alaska on loon stuff for over 20 years. And what kind of information are you looking for that would inform, the work, your current work? I'm also really curious about the winter stuff myself, and I do a lot of work with our seabird group who does look at fish out in the ocean. Anyway, so it's sort of a high level question on what would be useful to help us fill in the gaps. Alaska is often thought of as pristine, but we have a lot of, as you probably know, development going on, especially, I mean, I guess I'm thinking of, we have all 5 species. So if this is specific to common loons, it's a different, maybe different story, but, anyway, I'll just stop there.
No, I appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear someone from the Pacific Northwest side of things, because it is one of the larger unknowns geographically, at least from through my lens. I think the best thing that loon researchers in Alaska can do is, if you have groups that are monitoring the loons over time, ensuring that the data that is being collected is at the lake or territorial level, and that those territories or lakes, whatever resolution makes the most sense, are monitored over time, because you need to essentially be able to compare the conditions of a lake or the success of birds over time at those specific locations. It's tough. We dealt with this. I don't know if it's comparable to your situation, but we dealt with this with the Yellowstone working group. They contributed data for this project, and an unfortunate just factor of their data set is because of the geography that they work in, they don't get to their lakes frequently enough to be able to make strong conclusions, at least for this study. And we weren't able to standardize their data at the resolution that the other working groups had data for. And then we were just limited by sample size. And so we had to remove that from the analysis, just because we weren't able to run our models with, whatever the data were. So I get it, it's tricky. And I guess the balance there is logistics versus data resolution. If you can monitor, 10 lakes really well over 20 years, I'd say that's better than 50 lakes half-assed. Just because it depends on the questions you're trying to answer. But I'm always happy to chat more about it. And if you think you've got data that would be valuable for this, I'm happy to chat about it.
Well, when I first started, oh my gosh, a long time ago, there was Alaska Loon Watch. And so there is a data set of long-term, very specific, the level that you're looking for, but it's old. I mean, it's 20 or some more years old. So I don't know if that is a value. I'm trying to resurrect that effort in South Central Alaska, because there are people who are interested in doing it. But anyway, so we do have some of that data, but it's old. And I don't know what your, what you mentioned, your temporal constraints are, but I can always reach out to you separately to let
I'll plop my email was on the slides, but I'll plop it in here. I do think that, if it's a snapshot, Kathy already put it. Thanks, Kathy. Look at her go. I think if it's a snapshot that occurred maybe 20 years ago, it might be a different time window than we're looking at for the study, but you never know what might be applicable. And it's all part of the same, goal to better understand them. So happy to connect.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I saw Mark's hand was up.
Yes, Mark Ellis, you're next.
Oh, just a really simple question. So mercury probably affects their nervous system? I'm just trying
Mercury essentially, yes, it affects it can affect their physical development as well as their nervous system. That then, I'm probably not using the best terms, but it influences their essentially their operational capacity to forage and
Yeah.
behave. Yeah, and it creates a sense of lethargy that then will inherently influence their foraging success.
Yeah. That's, yeah. And, all these causes you talk about, none of them are getting better. And it might be just additive.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by sort of death by a thousand cuts is there's a multitude of threats that are happening to varying degrees. Um, and the goal of this project isn't necessarily to find a solution for every single one, but it's to identify and at least speculate on which ones might be occurring at widespread levels. It's tricky and it's unfortunate. And in the paper as well, it's also an interesting perspective because John, Nina, myself, as we've been working through this paper, some regions have seen increases in the number of adult loons over time, and yet we're seeing drastic decreases in productivity. So that poses additional questions to, are certain threats specific to certain life stages? And are certain threats more prevalent for when individuals are adults? It's such a complicated story.
Any other questions, folks? Heinrich, are you trying to ask a question?
Yeah, I have not one more question about nutrition, and we have an ongoing discussion about every fall seine fishing, bait fishers come to our lake. I've spent, similar to Sheila, I've spent many decades on this lake and have observed tremendous changes in fish population, mainly an increase in largemouth bass. But the real question I have is, how much does bait fishing which was really needed to support an ice fishing industry, how much does that affect our loon population, or should it be at least be taken into account as a major source for deprivation or cause of deprivation of small fish? I
Yeah,
don't think anybody has an answer, and I don't think
yeah.
IFW is monitoring it, but it's certainly a concern around here, Western Maine.
I think it's a great question. I don't have a clear answer, unfortunately. I don't have that information, but I think it contributes to the narrative related to resource availability for these loons. That maybe there is bait fishing that's occurring or has occurred, and it's possible that bait fishing itself is not great for loons if you're removing forage fish that the loons need. Or maybe bait fishing practices already take into account the size of the fish that are important to the loons. The same way that you can only harvest fish that are, within a certain, size range when you're fishing. They can't be too small because they're the young of the year, and they can't be too big because those are the ones that are really contributing offspring to the population. You want the ones in the middle ground, at least for many bass and trout and stuff. So maybe those parameters have been or need to be implemented for bait fishing. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry that that's not a very clear answer, but I think it's not a clear story, and I think in general, the loons need forage fish to survive, right? So,
Right.
Well, thank you, Matt. Now, if you want me to go in and put a mask over those graphs, I can do that and just let you talk away with the hidden graph if you'd prefer that. The recordings go up on a public website that nobody but us seems to be able to go to. So they're not that they could be picked up by somebody who really diligently looks for it, but I have not. It'd be hard to find. So I'll let you think about that and you can get back to me if you'd like to see them hidden a little bit better.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I'm not too worried about it. You know, the entire Nelswick group has seen it. I have no lack of
And,
trust in people, and
and
some of them might change anyways.
that probably went up publicly as well, come to think of it, because they put those recordings up. Any other final questions, guys? We're right on time. Oh, Marge, go ahead.
Um,
Oh, you muted yourself quickly, Marge.
Yeah, you were good. Then you mute. There you go.
For a second anyway. My question is, I mean, water quality and everything is vital, of course, but one of the problems we're having here in the Midwest is 4th of July. It's important, we're an important loon breeding area here in northern Wisconsin. And this year, I've gotten so many, I think our productivity is going to be extremely low. Not only because of any natural factors, but we had 2 adults run over by boats and, missing legs and that sort of thing. And of course, they had babies with them. They hatch about the 4th of July here. And of course, the babies died as well. People are throwing firecrackers into the water, and the sound percussion when the loons dive, when they come into our clinic, they're just either stunned, and they stay that way for at least a week or so. And they're adults, and they had babies, which no longer exist at that point in time. So I don't know if you have any feeling about that, but in our area, we have adults that are, old and breeding and that sort of thing, and they're just being I mean, it's awful. 4th of July here. Fortunately, you don't have it in Canada, which is thank you. But anyway, um, people aren't using any idea of consciousness or conservation or anything, and I worry that especially with the timing during breeding, that this is causing a big factor as well. I don't know, but I am collecting a lot of data. We admitted 11 loons this summer, and most of them were around the 4th of July, either with hit by jet skis, hit by boats. Not as much lead as before. I think they don't have time to do it. They're injured, and it's really a sad situation.
Wow, that's really compelling. Admittedly, I did not know that the fireworks influence the loons underneath the water surface simply from the sound effect. So that's really interesting. I don't know how widespread that is. Certainly, the boat traffic component is a threat across their range, both due to just direct mortality of strikes as well as the indirect effect of boat traffic on nesting habitat. What I guess all we can really do is at a local management level identify when those windows of high threat are and put our efforts into it. If we identify that there's a window related to either like public activity and also the loon breeding success, then that's a time that we should really hammer in when we are trying to enforce lake specific rules and management and so forth.
Now, a question, Marg, is I'm fairly certain in Canada it's illegal to put firecrackers in the water because of poaching laws for fish. Is it the same there? So they're breaking DFO laws?
It is, however, the laws are not abided by. It's also, you're not supposed to hit them, running at them, but they do. I think in our area, and I'm not even sure why, I think our DNR has sort of lost stamina since a governor was installed in 2014 and really sort of gutted the DNR, and it's not back yet. But I think that, the rules, everybody kind of
Migratory Bird Treaty Act is, they really don't think about it. I mean, I had a peregrine falcon shot in a city, a large city, larger city, and everybody's like, oh gosh, too bad. We have, I mean, it's not only like typical birds that are shot that are that people find annoying, crows and that sort of stuff, but it's the ones like loons. I mean, we have so many shot loons. I have radiographs of pellets in the head and through the body. It's like well, what they do is actually they do target practice. They wait for them to to dive, and then they shoot them when they come up. It's like a video game, except it's real. Often we don't get them because if they're dead at the time, but if they're injured, people find them and bring them in. So it's something that we're now keeping track of, but I don't know. I guess I feel sort of helpless. I don't know how to, other than getting lots of information out. We have Loon Watch. We try to get information out to boat enthusiasts and to lake associations, and hoping to. But people tend to be shy about saying something to their neighbor, like, oh, you're not supposed to run over a loon. I mean, that seems kind of common sense and maybe the right thing to do. But our population has changed. It's really very frustrating. The thing about percussion sound is they throw fireworks into the water and cherry bombs, and when they dive, the percussion under the water, it actually causes brain swelling and brain bleeds. So it's I have released 2 of them from that time, and they both seem to be doing okay. I think they actually left the lake that I put them on, which is good news, but they were stunned. I mean, literally didn't know where they were. I mean, you put a loon in a tub normally, they start fishing, but they're also, they're high stress birds. These guys were like bookends, I mean, they were like, and they were adults. So it's frustrating. We're collecting data, obviously, but I don't know where it's going, and it's frustrating. I worry about a reproduction here.
That's interesting. It's very interesting. Good for us all to know. We've lost Arlene. Arlene has a question, but she has disappeared from view. If you're out there, Arlene, feel free to come back on. Sheila just mentioned in Cass County, Minnesota, we have only 2 deputies patrolling 500 lakes, including some very large lake change. There's almost no enforcement of boats and jet skiing regulations. Yeah, I would say we have fewer of those on Ontario lakes than that. But it all depends on the weekend. And other things I think regionally everybody's going to have different problems, although some might go across the regions. I don't know what Arlene's question was, so we cannot answer that. Maybe she'll come back. But it's almost time to go anywhere. Does anybody? Matt probably has to head out as well. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, well then, Matt, thank you so much for this. It's been very interesting, and I'm glad you shared it with us. And if anybody else has questions you want to ask him, I've put Mac's contact information up. I'll make sure that when I learn that the publication is out, I will share that with everybody as well. Arlene, there's Arlene.
Oh,
Arlene?
hi. Okay,
Hi.
I was driving and I may still have to drive, but I was going to ask you, do you have specific contacts on these lakes?
These lakes for which lakes? The lakes about the
Are you
The
referring
ones,
to
the ones we're talking about with the fireworks and all of these problems. Do you have lake associations with contacts that are willing to protect the loons?
We have some, and we do utilize those. However, I think people are a little afraid to contact neighbors, or I mean, if they live near. I would like for them to get more active and to be more a
Yeah.
developed unit, perhaps, because that could go a long way. I think boat associations can be strong in like preventing things, or if you shoot off fireworks, you get you get a fine, something like that. But so far, 4th of July is almost like a holy grail. Nobody does much on it except destructive things.
Now, I can
Deep-
tell you from a different perspective. I come from a Marine family, and I follow the Canadian industrial boat information and the societies associated with that, and they're changing their stripes. They're starting to realize that they have to adapt to these things and get rid of the problem people to ensure the continuation of their societies and their use of their materials. So going to your marine associations and your lake associations and just say, here's something you can prevent, may be quite a successful option to try, because certainly they are starting to see enough complaints that they're recognizing if they don't change the way they do things, they're going to have more taxes, less use, they all want to prevent regulations on the lake. So so there is a mechanism in there to try to make non-regulation change by working with these groups that want to allow themselves some freedom. And I think that's something that I think we all have to consider is working with people we don't normally work with.
We are doing that
Yeah.
as much as possible, but I think, more and more and more, I'd like to, start developing more handouts and, do programs for them and that sort of thing, so they can feel like they have somebody behind them.
Sounds good.
How,
Any,
how
Arlene?
about the kids? I know we have on our lakes, we speak to lake associations or at picnics that they have and hand out things, and the kids are just shocked by the loon chicks getting hurt, but and also the other thing is people with PTSD.
Yep.
And all of that, that's a factor in use of these noise makers, just getting ahead.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
for
We've lost you, Arlene, but we understand what
I
you're.
know we have
Yeah.
some very strong. Yep. Okay, we're all set. Thank you very much.
Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. Well, that's something, and maybe that's something we can bring to some of the committees this winter to look at. I don't know. The committees are not functioning too well right now because everybody's in the field or away, but we
Yeah,
should.
right.
Yeah, we should probably close it up for today. I think this has been a great talk. If you have any questions, you got emails, you got Matt's email, and we'll share the recording at a later date. And I'm very happy to see everybody today. And any final comments or questions before we go? Very
Thank you
quiet
very
group
much,
today.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
very much, Matt. Yep.
Thanks,
Thanks
everybody.
all.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye. Did you have a
Bye.
question, John? Nope. Okay. All right. Talk to y'all later.